So I'm going to go ahead and get a picture in here, and I have some preset images that I've used in the past with this article. And really, when we're working with the grids and guides like this, even if we don't have a sketch, getting our images in along with our content really will help guide the design and sort of get it moving at least. As you work, you can start refining the details and seeing the lines that the images offer to play content off of. And of course, you're working with the content itself that does get broken down, in this case, into sections and columns and so on. So we just want to get that ball rolling. So I'll go to File and Place, and I'll choose the image that I've decided I'll be working with. And this is sort of the lead image, so I can use this to initiate the editorial. I can use it as a full 2-page spread. I can use it as a single page. So I'm just going to get it placed in up at the bleed here, and I'll go from there. So this is a pretty big image. It's been preset for a 2-page spread on a previous magazine. So I'm just going to size it down. So Command Shift, click and drag, so that I make sure I'm scaling both the frame and the image. I'm going to take it from the bleed here over to the gutter. I'm just going to turn my guides off, Command semicolon there, just to see what I've got. And I'm going to get a read on this image. I have no plan for this article right now, so I'm kind of seeing what I'm working with. And what I do want to do is make sure, of course, that it's falling within the baseline grid. So I'll turn my grids and guides on here again, and I'm going to see where things are landing. So the image right now, it's landing at the gutter of a row, and I'll just turn the baseline grid on here so that I can see what that's going to be showing. So the one thing that you may find, and I should have set this a little better in terms of my rows and leading, but it's not too bad. You'll find that sometimes your baseline and your rows don't exactly line up, and that's poor planning on my part. I should have been much more specific with the gutters of my rows and columns so that it did match the segmenting of the baseline. So that is something that I would probably want to correct in the setup again. I'm not going to go in right now and redo all the columns and rows, but I could in fact open up the leading a little bit to match. So ideally we get our image set to the columns, and then you also get the image set to the baseline. So all of these guides line up. I'm not going to do it now, but it was an oversight on my part that I didn't consider both of those. It's not too bad though, it's not too far off. Of course, the further we get down the page, it's going to be off a little more, but it's not really a problem in this case. So I want to see, just with the baseline and with the grids and guides, where this image can sit well, and then we can initiate our content. There's a couple of nice defining lines in this image, but one of the things I like about this image is that I like it, but it's both, it does present a challenge too, is that it has both the sky and ground in it. So I have to decide, do I want to really ground this image, or do I want to anchor it up higher? And when I've used this image in the past, I've actually used it as a full 2-page spread, which made sense with the sky and the ground. And it was the initial entry into the article where the first page here had the headline and the content. I'm going to do it a little differently this time. So I'm actually just going to take it down to the bottom here, because I think it's probably going to be it's a pretty heavy image. It's dark, so it's going to add a little bit of a fair bit of weight on the page. So I am going to keep it at the bottom there. And then if I want, I can carry it over into the other spread. I can do a little bit of a carryover there. But one thing I don't want to do is go too far into the other page. I don't want it to really come to the point where it should be a spread. And then I'll put my headline up in the top here. So I'm just going to get it set again within the columns and rows. And although it may not scale there, I'm trying to scale it within the frame. I'm going to put it about there, so it's on the inside of that that row. I'm going to get rid of this baseline for a moment again. So it's on the inside of this row, and I'm going to close the frame up so that it's on the inside of that column. So remember, we're always trying to work on the insides. If I went over here, I'm on the outside. So I'm crossing over the gutter. So I may want to change this later when I get more content in, but for now, I'm just getting it placed well within the rows. And even this part, the frame is at the row, but the image isn't. So there's a little more frame than image at the moment. So I'm just going to click onto the image. Oops, Command 0. I'll click on the image and have a little bit. I'm going to bump it up just a bit at the bleed there. It's not going to be a problem. So I'll move that up so that it meets the row. And I'm going to go to View and Display Performance, turn on my high quality display, get a good view of that image. Command semicolon to turn those grids off. So this image really is a great image for a full 2-page spread, but the way I'm using it to ground it. The weight of the image is seating it at the bottom of the page. So now I can take some of my content here and start that headline. I'm just going to copy this out. I'll copy out the headline, and I'm going to remove it from the article so I'm sure not to repeat it, and just put it in its own text frame. And I'll turn my grids and guides back on, and I can start designing. So from here, I have to start choosing my typefaces and see what I want to use. So I'm just going to kind of go to some of my go-to typefaces for a moment, just to get something showing here. And when you work with the headline, even the headline, and by the way, when I scaled that type, I still had to do Command Shift and click and drag so that I'm scaling the type in the frame and not just the frame. When you're working with the headline, you still want to adhere to the rows and the columns and the baseline. I don't have the baseline showing right now, but I will adjust it. What I really want to do is just get this set up so that it's got its place in accordance with the image. It's got its place with alignment, but also in terms of the weight. So when I look at where things are landing in the image, for example, this line here, in the image, this is a pretty strict vertical line. It's not exact to the gutter, but I'm just going to move this over a bit. So I'm going to click on that circle, and I'm going to use my left arrow and nudge that over just a little. Now that's probably going to throw things off slightly over here, but actually it won't, because I did have plenty of extra there. So that's good. I can bring it over a little bit. And then I'm going to choose that inside gutter, that inside column, to initiate my content. When we align, I'm technically aligning that, but optically it may not appear aligned to that part of the building where I want to align this type. So I want to nudge it over a bit so that it's optically aligned. This is where we're always battling optical alignment versus technical alignment. I'll turn the grids and guides back on. You can see I've exceeded the technical alignment a bit, but optically I may still have to adjust it, but that's getting me started. So I'm just going to knock that down, and then I'll start laying this out, playing with the leading. So this is not on baseline, and I can choose where I'm going to place this. For this, I think I may go to all uppercase. So I'm going to change that to uppercase, and that's a much nicer typeface in uppercase. And I'm going to try and just see how it's going to look seated on this, because the space up above this, especially with it being kind of a sky image, feels a little awkward. So I'm going to get that aligned. I'm going to use my arrow keys to nudge that down. And the more I zoom in, if I make sure I'm clicked on that, holding my shift key to move it, I can see that it's kind of jumping around to the snaps. So this may be adhered to the baseline. So I'm going to check that. I'm going to go to the paragraph settings and I can see there it is. It's on the baseline. So I'll take that off of baseline, go back, and then when I hold shift, I can move it very specifically down. So I can zoom in. The more I zoom in, the more specific in the movement I can be. And this appears, this image, I'm being really picky here with it, but it appears that the image itself still may not be exactly on that row. It's not a big deal, but I do want to make sure that it is, and it is. It's fine. It's just the image isn't bumped up to it, so I'll make sure there it is. So now it's actually on the image, and even that I can move down very specifically. It's on the row line now. So that gets really specific, but sometimes it's good, and it's good to be that specific. It's helpful, and from a design standpoint, the more particular you are, the more precise you are, especially in magazine design, you know that things are going to be a lot easier to line up, especially really across the spread. So before I get too far into this and make it boring, I'm just going to close up the leading a little more on this and nudge that down again. And I'm going to choose a color. I want to kind of tie this in, and I actually want to make it a little bigger. I'm going to try and get that to actually line up with the inside line of that part of the building. This feels like an odd overhang. Actually, for the sake of brevity, I'm going to leave it, but I would probably go adjust that. So I'll try and enlarge this so that the wording lands around the margin there, and it's still staying aligned at this side. And then I'm going to add some color to that. I would like a little bit of variance in the type sizing here right now, that I have right now, and I can work with that later, but I'm just going to use my eyedropper, grab the dark blue from this to apply to that type, and just see how that feels. Press W, and that's bringing a little bit of a tie in there. I really do want to have a larger title. And then over here, when I get onto this side of the page, I like the white space. I like the way the title is sort of playing with the image a little bit, the shining down. It's not lined up. It would be nice if it could really line up nicely to that, but we don't want to be carrying type across the gutter anyway. So I'm just going to leave it for now. And then over on the other side, where I start actually working with the content, I've got my introductory line here. So this would be my intro line. So I think in this case, I would probably pull that. I'll move this over, and I would use this white space to set that in. And that's when I would really start working with the baseline. So this would be a little bigger, probably in a similar version. It would be a version of this typeface, the Trade Gothic. And I would do my intro line on this side and then begin carrying the article on the first page, or really in this case, it's page 4. One thing I want to remember is that on the first page here, I have to decide, do I want to have the page number? So we have a page number down here that's not really visible on that image, or do I want to just remove it altogether? In this case, I want to remove it. So I have to remember to unlock my master page items, go down here, Command-Shift-Click, and I'll get rid of that page number. And that wasn't the page number, that was my image. So I'll undo that. And I'll go back, Command-Shift-Click, make sure I get the right item there. There we go. I'll delete that and relock that layer. Now, after you've overridden a master page item like that, if you want to get it back, you can. You're not, if it's something that you go back and you change and you realize, oh, I removed the page number, or I removed that folio content, whatever the case may be, you can go back. And the way you do that, I'll unlock this just to be sure, but I can go to my master page in the Pages panel, and I can drag and drop that master back onto it. And it puts that image, that page number back there. So it kind of reapplies the master from a fresh start. I'm just going to undo that and lock everything up. Now, one thing that would have happened in that case is I want to make sure that when I drag and drop that layer, that the page number itself was still on the proper layer. And I could see that it was because it still had the red frame. So that's fine. So in a short time, we can see we've initiated a layout, playing with the imagery, finding defining lines, using our grids and guides. And I haven't gotten too far, but already we can see how the grids and guides are even interacting with the image. So when I bring in my intro line, I can choose where I want to, from the image, where I want to align that content. And I would probably choose to start in and around here with this, even though this is, of course, not properly set up content-wise. You know, I don't have the typesetting and done on that and everything, and typeface chosen. I can at least see where this is coming together. I've got good alignment with the rows coming to this part of the image, so I can play around with that. And it is okay to move things up a bit if I have to, but making sure that they're not adhered to the baseline. So I'm going to turn that off baseline because it's not body copy. So I have that freedom with it. And then I can move that around, nudge it up as I need to, always going for that optical alignment. And then I can start working with that content. Now, one final thing that you want to remember when you're adding, if you're adding background color, you're adding maybe a color to the background, like a full coverage or just a header. I'm just going to do a sample of one here. So if I wanted a header up here, which I likely wouldn't in this kind of layout, but we want to make sure that we're, of course, choosing the color that we have. And I'm just going to put a color on here, but really making sure that we don't have a stroke on that. So I'm going to put one on here just so we can see. I'll press W. So you can see that black outline. It's kind of hiding when I roll over it, just when the frame comes on. But something like that, unless it's really intentional and you've made it thick enough that it's visible and it has some presence that you wanted, you want to make sure that when you make those background colors or those sections in color, to eliminate that stroke, to just change it to none. You can do that up top here. You can do it over at the swatch here. But selecting that, and that'll just make for much cleaner layout. And the same thing with your image frames, making sure, just clicking on that image frame and making sure that the stroke is set to none. So we don't have a lot here, but we're on our way. This gets that layout initiated. We've used our main image, and now we can really start massaging the content.